Our first story comes from a man named Daniel. At the time this happened, he was 29 years old and working as a financial analyst for a mid-sized investment firm in downtown Chicago. His office occupied floors 14 through 17 of a larger building, shared with several other companies. Daniel describes himself as someone who was always the last to leave. Not because he loved his job, he's quick to point out that he didn't, but because he was newer to the role and felt the pressure of keeping up with colleagues who had years more experience. Staying late was just part of his routine. Most nights, he'd be at his desk until 9, sometimes 10 p.m. He'd gotten used to the building at night. He knew when the cleaners came, usually around 7:30, working their way up from the lower floors. He knew the security guard's name was Phil, and that Phil did his rounds at 8 and again at 11. He knew the vending machine on 15 made a loud clunking sound every hour. He knew the rhythms of the building after dark, the way you only can when you've spent enough nights alone in it. That familiarity, he says, is exactly what made the night of March 4th feel wrong so quickly. It was a Thursday. Daniel was on the 16th floor, working through a report that had to be on his manager's desk by Friday morning. It was just past 8 p.m. when the cleaning crew arrived on his floor, right on schedule. 2 women and a man, same crew he recognized. From the past several months, they exchanged the usual nods. Daniel put his headphones back in. This was normal. This was routine. He was deep in his spreadsheet when something made him glance up. There was a 4th person standing near the far end of the floor, by the row of offices that lined the east wall, was a man Daniel didn't recognize. He was dressed similarly to the cleaning crew, dark pants, a gray shirt, but he wasn't pushing a cart. He wasn't carrying any supplies. He was just standing there, near the window that overlooked the street below, with his back partially turned. Daniel figured he was a new hire. Maybe it was someone's first night, and he wasn't sure what he was supposed to be doing yet. He turned back to his screen. 20 minutes later, Daniel got up to refill his water bottle in the kitchen on the other side of the floor. The cleaning crew was still working. He could hear the vacuum running near the reception area. As he passed through the open workspace, he glanced toward the east offices again. The man was still there. He hadn't moved, still standing near the same window, same posture, not cleaning anything, not looking at his phone, just standing. Daniel slowed down. He watched the man for a moment. The man didn't react, didn't turn around. That's weird, Daniel thought, but he kept walking, filled his bottle, came back. He told himself it was nothing. New guy, probably nervous, probably waiting for instructions. He put his headphones back in. At around 9:15, the cleaning crew began wrapping up. Daniel heard them moving toward the elevator bank with their cart. He pulled out one earbud and called out a casual goodnight. The 2 women waved. The man he recognized gave a nod. The elevator doors opened. The 3 of them stepped in. The 4th man was not with them. Daniel stood up from his desk. He looked across the floor toward the east offices. The lights in that section were off. They were on a motion sensor and had timed out. He couldn't see anything in the dark corridor between the offices. He told himself the man had probably left earlier without Daniel noticing. He told himself there was a completely normal explanation. He sat back down and stared at his screen without reading a single word for the next 5 minutes. Then he heard it. A door. Not slamming, just the soft, deliberate click of a door being carefully, quietly pulled shut. Coming from the direction of the east offices, Daniel's heart rate jumped. He pushed back from his desk slowly and looked toward the darkened corridor. The motion sensor lights were still off, which meant his brain worked through it quickly. Either something had moved in that space and then stopped, or nothing had moved in there at all, and the sound came from somewhere else. He called. Out. Hello? Silence. He called for Phil, the security guard. No answer. Phil's rounds weren't for another hour. Daniel pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. He walked toward the east offices slowly, telling himself with each step that he was going to feel incredibly stupid in about 30 seconds when he found absolutely nothing. He reached the corridor, swept his light across it. Empty desks. Closed. Doors. Nothing. He tried one of the office doors. Locked. Tried the next one. Locked out the third one opened out. It was a small, rarely used conference room. No windows. A round table, 6 chairs, a whiteboard on the wall with old notes that nobody had bothered to erase. A faint smell that Daniel struggled to describe. He said it was like someone had been in that room for a while. Stale. Warm. Like the air hadn't circulated properly in some time. He looked around the room. Nothing immediately out of place. Then. He looked under the table. A black duffel bag, partially unzipped. Inside, he could see it clearly from where he was standing. A change of clothes, a water bottle, a phone charger, and what appeared to be several granola bars still in their wrappers. Daniel left the room. He walked quickly back to his desk, grabbed his laptop and his coat, and took the elevator straight to the lobby, where he told the front desk security guard, a woman named Rena, what he'd found. Rena called Phil. Phil called the building's head of security. What they discovered over the next hour reshaped the way Daniel thought about every night he'd spent alone in that building. The fourth man was not a new member of the cleaning crew. He had no connection to the cleaning crew at all. Building security reviewed footage going back 3 weeks and found the same individual appearing in the building on at least 9 separate occasions, always after 7 p.m., always on floors with lower foot traffic in the evenings, always slipping into spaces that weren't being watched. He had been using a defunct stairwell access door on the 9th floor, a door that was supposed to be alarmed but had a broken sensor that nobody had flagged. He'd been entering the building, waiting out the busier hours in unused rooms, and leaving in the early morning. What he was doing there, whether he was casing the building, looking for something specific, or simply using it as somewhere to be, was never fully established. He was identified and banned from the building. Daniel doesn't know what happened after that. What Daniel does know is that the man was in that conference room while he was sitting 30 feet away, headphones in, staring at a spreadsheet. He never stayed late alone again. The second story comes from a woman named Mara. She was 34 at the time, working in human resources for a healthcare company in Atlanta. Her office was in a 12-story building with an attached multi-level parking structure connected by an enclosed walkway on the 3rd floor. Mara worked late fairly regularly, usually 2 or 3 nights a week, rarely past 8:30. She'd been with the company for 4 years and had used that parking structure hundreds of times. She knew where the cameras were. She knew which levels had the best lighting. She parked on level 4 every single day, same general area, close to the elevator. On a Tuesday evening in late October, Mara finished up around 8 p.m. and headed through the walkway into the parking structure. She described the structure that night as particularly empty. Most people had cleared out by 6:30, and the few remaining cars were scattered across different levels. Her footsteps echoed. The fluorescent lights on level 3 were doing that thing, where one of them flickers without ever quite going out. She pressed the button for level 4. The elevator arrived. She stepped in. The doors were almost closed when a hand appeared in the gap and pushed them back open. A man stepped in. Mara placed him in his mid-40s. Average height, dark jacket, a badge lanyard around his neck. the kind that suggested he worked in the building. She had never seen him before, but the building had hundreds of employees, and she didn't know everyone. He pressed 4. Same floor as her dot. This alone didn't concern her. Lots of people parked on 4. The elevator moved. Then it stopped on level 3, a floor neither of them had pressed. The doors opened. The landing outside was empty. No one waiting. The doors stayed open for an uncomfortable few seconds, then slid closed again. Mara noticed the man hadn't reacted to this at all. Most people, she thought, would have glanced out, looked mildly puzzled, said something like, "Nobody there." He just stared forward. The elevator reached 4. The doors opened. Mara let him step out first, a habit she had without ever consciously deciding on it. He moved to the right. Her car was to the left. She turned left and walked at a normal pace. Keys already in her hand. Another habit. She heard his footsteps behind her. She told herself he was parked in the same direction. She didn't turn around. She walked a little faster. His footsteps kept pace. She reached her car, unlocked it with the fob, and got in quickly. As she pulled the door shut, she glanced in her rearview mirror. He had stopped walking. He was standing, about 2 rows back, between 2 SUVs, watching her car, not walking to his own car, not on his phone, just standing, watching. Mara locked her doors and started the engine. She sat there for a moment, unsure whether to back out, which would mean driving in his direction, or to wait. She decided to wait. She pulled out her phone and pretended to look at it while watching him in her mirror. After about 90 seconds, he turned and walked back toward the elevator. She drove home. She didn't tell anyone right away. She said she felt like she couldn't explain it without sounding paranoid. Nothing had technically happened. He hadn't threatened her, hadn't said anything. She didn't even know for certain that he'd been watching her specifically. She let it go. The following Thursday, she stayed late again. As she was packing up, a colleague, a woman named Dana from the legal department, knocked on her office door. Dana looked uncomfortable. She said she wanted to mention something because she'd noticed Mara sometimes left late. Dana told her that she'd reported a man to building security the previous week, someone who had approached her in the parking structure and asked her a series of questions that felt wrong. What floor she worked on, whether she parked in the structure every day, whether she ever worked weekends. He'd been wearing a building lanyard, which was why she hadn't immediately walked away. She'd described him to security. Mara felt her stomach drop. She asked Dana to describe the man. The description matched. Building security pulled footage. They found the same individual appearing on parking structure cameras on 5 separate evenings over a 3-week period. Always after 7 p.m., always on level 4, always appearing to observe women leaving alone. He had a valid visitor's pass. He'd been to the building twice for meetings with a vendor, but he had no business being there on the other nights. He was identified, and the situation was escalated. Mara never encountered him again, but she said the thing that stayed with her, the thing she still thinks about, isn't the fear she felt in the elevator or in the parking structure. It's the fact that she almost talked herself out of trusting her instincts entirely, that she sat in her car watching a man watch her, and her first thought was that she was being unreasonable. She wants anyone who hears her story to know, you're not being unreasonable. The third story was submitted by a man named Callum. He was 26 at the time, a junior graphic designer at a marketing agency in Seattle. The agency occupied most of the 8th floor of the 14-story office building in the South Lake Union neighborhood. The building had a number of floors that were only partially leased or between tenants. Floor 11, according to the building directory, had been vacant for a little over a year. The previous occupant, a tech startup, had dissolved and cleared out quietly. Callum knew this because, in his words, there was nothing to know. Floor 11 simply didn't come up. Nobody talked about it, except that every now and then, usually when Callum was in the office late, which was most nights, he would notice something. The lights on floor 11 were on. Not all of them, but a faint, visible glow from several windows that he could see from a certain angle near the east-facing windows on the 8th floor. He'd noticed it a handful of times and thought, each time, that it was probably automated building systems keeping a base level of lighting on for safety or maintenance. He'd thought about mentioning it and never did. On a Wednesday night in February, Callum was the only person left on the 8th floor. His creative director had left around 7. The rest of the team had cleared out by 6. It was now nearly 9 p.m., and Callum was finishing up a brand deck that had been consuming his life for the better part of 2 weeks. He got up to stretch and wandered to the east windows. He did this sometimes just to look out, let his eyes rest. He looked up out of habit. Floor 11 was lit up, more than usual. At least 3 or 4 windows glowing clearly, one of them bright enough that he could see movement, a shadow passing behind frosted glass. Callum stared at it. Then he made a decision that he freely admits, in retrospect, was not a good one. He decided to go up and look. He told himself he was just curious. He told himself it was probably a maintenance crew or a prospective tenant doing a walkthrough, and he'd feel silly for thinking twice about it. He took the elevator to 11. The doors opened into a small lobby area, the kind that exists between the elevator bank and the main floor entrance of any given office suite. There was a set of glass double doors ahead of him, the kind with a badge reader. The doors were propped open with what appeared to be a folded-up piece of cardboard jammed into the frame. Callum stood in the lobby and looked through the glass doors into the floor beyond. The lights he'd seen from below were on. Overhead, fluorescents in 2 or 3 sections of the open floor. The rest was dark. From where he was standing, he could see the open workspace, rows of empty cubicles, bare desks, a few leftover chairs. The carpet had the slightly faded look of a space that hadn't been maintained in a while. He pushed through the propped door. The smell hit him first. Not a bad smell exactly, but a human smell. The specific subtle warmth of a space that someone has been occupying. He recognized it instinctively, even before he could articulate it. He walked slowly into the space, called out a hello. No answer. He moved further in toward the lit section, past the empty cubicles, past a row of offices with glass walls, most of them empty. Then, near the far end of the floor, he found the source of the light, a cluster of offices that had clearly been made to look occupied. One of them had a sleeping bag on the floor, neatly rolled to one side. A small camping lantern on the desk, off right now, but clearly used. A stack of paperback books. A grocery bag with food in it. A phone charger running from a wall outlet. And taped to the wall above the desk, several printed photographs. A woman, a few kids, some landscapes. Like someone had made the space feel like theirs. Callum stood in the doorway of that office and processed what he was looking at. Then the door to the stairwell, on the opposite end of the floor, opened. He heard footsteps, unhurried, familiar. The footsteps of someone who knew exactly where they were going and had walked this floor many times before. Callum didn't wait to see who it was. He moved, fast, but trying not to run, some part of his brain telling him that running would be loud, back through the open workspace toward the elevator lobby. He could hear the footsteps continuing, getting slightly closer. He reached the elevator, pressed the button, stood there for what felt like an extremely long time. The elevator arrived. He got in. He pressed 8. As the doors slid closed, he saw, or thought he saw, he still isn't entirely sure. A figure appeared at the far end of the lobby behind the glass doors. Standing still, watching the elevator, Callum went back to the 8th floor, grabbed his bag, and left the building immediately. He reported it to building management the next morning. Building management sent someone to investigate floor 11 that afternoon. What they found confirmed what Callum had seen, evidence that someone had been living in that office suite for an estimated 2 to 4 months. They had accessed the floor through a rooftop maintenance door that fed into the stairwell, bypassing the badge-controlled entry points entirely. The setup was organized and low-profile, enough that routine checks had missed it. The individual was never positively identified. The rooftop access point was secured. Floor 11 was relocked. Callum still works at the same agency. He still occasionally looks up at the windows of the floors above when he's working late. He says the lights on 11 haven't been on since. The final story tonight comes from a man named Victor. Unlike the others, Victor wasn't an office worker. He was the overnight security guard, at the time this happened. Victor was 31 and working for a contract security firm that placed guards in commercial office buildings across the Dallas area. He'd been doing the job for about 3 years. He was experienced, level-headed, and by his own description, not someone who spooked easily. He'd dealt with break-ins before. He'd called the police before. He'd walked dark buildings alone more times than he could count. He was not, he's careful to say, someone who scares easily. The building Victor was assigned to was a 9-story commercial building in a business park on the north side of the city, mostly financial and legal firms. On weeknights, it cleared out completely by 7 p.m., sometimes earlier. Victor's shift started at 9. His job was to monitor the front desk camera system and do rounds, a full walk of every floor, twice per shift. Once at 11 p.m., once at 2 a.m. The building had a solid security system. Cameras in the lobby, elevator banks, main corridors, and all entry and exit points. Motion sensors on every floor that logged activity in the building's security software. Victor had worked this building for about 4 months, and in that time, the overnight had been without incident. On a Thursday in September, just after 11 p.m., Victor began his first rounds. Floors 2 through 5. Clear. Floor 6. He noticed something. The motion sensor log for floor 6 showed a brief trigger at 10:47 p.m. Victor noted the time. He'd arrived at 9, and no one had badged into the building since 8:15 p.m., when the last employee in the building, a paralegal at a law firm on floor 6, he'd later confirm, had left. The motion trigger had come 30 minutes after Victor's own arrival, and he hadn't been to floor 6 yet. He looked around floor 6 carefully. Conference rooms, offices, kitchen area, all empty. Nothing visibly disturbed. He noted it in his log as a possible sensor irregularity and kept moving. Floors 7 through 9. Clear. Victor came back to the front desk, made himself a coffee, and checked the camera feeds. Everything looked normal. At 11:48 p.m., the motion sensor for floor 6 triggered again. Victor watched the camera feed for floor 6. The main corridor camera showed nothing. But floor 6 had 2 blind spots, a short corridor that led to a secondary stairwell exit, and the interior of the large corner conference room, which had no interior camera. Victor called his dispatcher, who told him to investigate and to call back if he needed police dispatched. He took the elevator to 6. He started with the secondary stairwell corridor. Clear. He moved to the corner conference room. The door was closed. He opened it. The room was dark. He swept his flashlight across it. Long table, chairs, whiteboard, credenza along the wall. His light passed over something near the credenza and he brought it back. One of the credenza cabinet doors was slightly ajar. The credenza was large, the kind of long, low storage unit that runs along an entire wall, maybe waist height, with cabinets along the bottom. Victor looked at the open cabinet door. He stood there for a moment. Then he took a step toward it. The cabinet door swung open, and a man came out fast. Victor had a fraction of a second to react. He stepped back hard, hit the conference table behind him, and the man barreled past him and out the conference room door. Victor recovered and followed. The man ran toward the secondary stairwell, the one Victor had just checked. Victor was fast, and he was motivated, and the gap between them was closing. But the man knew the stairwell. He knew, specifically, that the door at the bottom of the secondary stairwell led to a loading corridor that ran the length of the buildings. Ground floor and exited through a maintenance bay that opened onto the service road on the building's east side. Victor did not know this. He'd never used that route. By the time Victor navigated the loading corridor and reached the maintenance bay exit, the man was gone. Police were called. They searched the area but didn't find him. Building management was contacted. An investigation of the secondary stairwell revealed how the man had gotten in. A ground floor access door to the loading corridor had a lock that had been tampered with, likely with a bump key or similar tool, in a way that was subtle enough to pass casual inspection. Security footage was reviewed across multiple nights. The same individual had entered the building on 3 prior occasions, always between 10:30 and 11 p.m., always using the same access point, always going to floor 6. What he was looking for, or what he was doing in that building, was never determined. With certainty, nothing had been reported stolen. No systems had been accessed. He seemed to know the building well, which suggested either prior employment or significant prior observation. Victor continued working in building security after this. He said it didn't shake his confidence in the job, but he did say one thing changed. He used to do his rounds alone, as a matter of course. It was a solo post. It was just the reality of it. After this, whenever he had the option to have the second guard overlap with him at the start of rounds, he took it. He said the building had cameras in every corridor, a full motion sensor system, a front desk monitor running around the clock, and a professional security guard on site, and a man still managed to hide inside it, undetected, for hours.